Iran is a republic in the Middle East, bordering Iraq and Turkey to the west, Azerbaijan, Armenia, the Caspian Sea and Turkmenistan to the north, and Afghanistan and Pakistan to the east. The republic also includes Qeshm, Karg and other islands in the Persian Gulf. In addition, there are three small islands, Abu Musa, Greater Tunbi and Lesser Tunbi, in the Strait of Hormuz, which the country took possession of in 1971. The topography is very varied, and the country consists of a central plateau almost completely surrounded by mountains. The population is about 80 million, 2015, and consists of many different ethnic and linguistic groups, of which Persians are the largest. The majority of the people are Shia Muslims. About half of the economy is centrally controlled, and about 30% of government spending is channeled through religious foundations. Oil and gas production dominate, but revenues have fallen as a result of increasingly stringent international sanctions due to the country's controversial nuclear program. Since the 1979 revolution, Iran has been an Islamic republic, in which the supreme religious leader is also the head of state, Wali Faqih. Religious leaders also hold other executive positions. In the autumn of 1980, Iraq went to war with Iran, and 500,000 soldiers and an unknown number of civilians were killed in the war before a ceasefire was reached in 1988, while the borders remained as before. The name is Persian, the land of the Aryans. The country was called Persia until 1935, when Iran was introduced in official correspondence. During a transitional period, both Persia and Iran were used, but now Iran and Iranians are the norm. Iran's national anthem is Surud-e Melli-e Jomhuri-e Eslami-e Iran. Geography and environment. Iran is topographically a very diverse country. The interior of the country consists of a central plateau that is almost completely surrounded by mountains. The lowlands form only narrow stripes along the coasts. The coastal land along the Caspian Sea is very narrow, and some is below sea level. Geologically, Iran can be divided into three main regions: the Central Plateau, the Zagros Mountains and their eastern continuation, and the northern mountain ranges. The northwestern part of the coast towards the Persian Gulf belongs to the Shatt al-Arab and Karen deltas, and is a flat and swampy marsh area. East of Bushehr, the mountains rise steeply from a narrow coastal belt in chains that run parallel to the coast. The country is often haunted by devastating earthquakes. In 1968 about 20,000 people died in Khorasan, in 1972 about 5,000 in the southern Fars province, and in 2003 about 20,000 in Bam. Iran is located in the subtropical belt, but the climate is characterized by large differences between south and north and between lowlands and highlands. The climate is generally continental with large annual temperature variations. About a tenth of the country is forested, and the largest forest areas are found in the Caspian region, on the northern slope of the Elburz Mountains, with summer green deciduous trees, but almost no conifers. At the Persian Gulf, date palms and other fruit trees are grown. There are over 5,000 species of seedlings in Iran, many are endemic. Wildlife is characterized by species that are adapted to the steppe and desert environment. Most species are pale Arctic, bear, lynx, wild boar, deer, but there are elements from both Indian and African fauna. 520 bird species have been observed in Iran. People and society. In 2015, Iran's population was estimated at 79.1 million. A baby boom after the 1979 revolution means that the population is still young. The majority of the population lives in cities, 71%, and life expectancy is 72 years for men and 75 years for women. The population belongs to many different ethnic, religious and linguistic groups. The Iranian language group makes up about 70% of the population, including Shiite Muslim Iranians, 45%, Sunni Muslim Kurds, 8%, and Baluchis, 2%, some of whom are nomads. About 30% are Turkish-speaking, including Azerbaijani, 16%, in the northwest and the semi-nomadic Turkmens in the northeast. The Indo-European language Persian, Farsi, is the official language and mother tongue of half the population. A total of about 30 other languages are spoken from several different language families. About 98.4% of Iran's population are Muslims, of whom 90.4% are Shia Muslims. Sunni Islam is primarily represented among minority groups such as Kurds, Turkmens and Baluchis. The country has a number of religious minorities. The constitution guarantees religious rights for the approved minorities, i.e. Jews, Christians and Zarathustra followers, Parsis. State and politics. Iran is an Islamic republic. The political system in the country has its basis in the Constitution of 1979. It was later revised in 1989. According to the Constitution, the state is to be governed by Islamic scribes. The head of state, Wali Faqih, the supreme leader, is elected by a separate council, the Majlis-e-Kobregan, Council of Experts, which consists of 86 clergy. The constitution gives the supreme leader broad powers in all areas of society. He controls key institutions such as the judiciary, the police, the army and the media. He can reject all decisions made by the president and parliament and has the decisive say in the formulation of domestic and foreign policy. Since the 1979 revolution, the country has had two ayatollahs, spiritual leaders, who sit for life. From 1979 to 1989 Ayatollah Khomeini and from 1989 Ayatollah Khamenei. Executive power is vested in the president, elected by universal suffrage for 4 years. The president can be re-elected once. Following a change in the constitution in 1989, the president is also head of government. Legislative power is vested in the Majlis-e-Shura-e-Islami, Islamic Consultative Assembly, parliament with 290 members, who are elected in general elections for 4 years. The current president is Hassan Rouhani, elected in the presidential election in 2013. He was re-elected in 2017. Other important bodies are the Guardian Council, which must ensure that Parliament's decisions are in accordance with Islam, the Brokerage Council, which has a conflict resolution function when Parliament and the Guardian Council disagree, and an advisory function to the Supreme Leader, and the Revolutionary Guard, which was established in 1979 to defend the revolution. Many centers of power compete for influence in a complex political system. Iranian criminal law is based on Islamic law and principles that can carry the death penalty for a number of crimes. The Hudud punishments, physical punishment methods such as whipping, amputations and the death penalty for certain crimes are practiced. History. The Persian Empire was founded around 500 BCE, and was in ancient times one of the first real-world empires. During Darius I, it stretched from Greece to India. The country was 641 possibly conquered by the Arabs, who introduced Islam. It was later conquered by Turkish Seljuks and then by the Mongols, 1221. In recent times, Persian culture experienced a period of flourishing under the Safavids in the 16th and 17th centuries. During the 19th century, the country came under increasing British and Russian influence. Reza Khan, an officer in the Iranian Cossack regiment, seized power in a coup in 1925 and ascended the throne as Shah of the Pahlavi dynasty. During World War II, British and Soviet troops invaded the country. When Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill met in Tehran in 1944, they were protected by the Red Army. In 1953, the elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, who had nationalized the oil industry, was deposed in a British-American coup, and the young Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was installed on the throne. He was a close ally of the United States until 1979, when the Islamic Revolution brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power. When Khomeini died in 1989, Ali Khamenei became supreme leader. Under him, pragmatic, conservative, populist and reform-minded politicians have shifted to holding the presidency. Economy and business. Iran is considered a regional power, and plays an important role in the world economy due to the country's large reserves of oil and natural gas. In 2012, Iran was No. 25, nominal, and No. 17, adjusted for purchasing power, on the list of the world's largest economies. Growth was estimated at 1.9% and inflation at 34%. The Revolutionary Guard controls an estimated one-third of the economy. The most important industries are petroleum, petrochemical products, fertilizers, caustic soda, car production and pharmaceuticals. Petroleum accounts for 80% of export revenues. The most important trading partners are China, Japan, Turkey, India, South Korea and Italy. Iran's controversial nuclear program has led to international sanctions that have halved oil exports. Self-sufficiency and domestic investment have picked up, but unemployment is double-digit and many Iranians are looking for work abroad. The brain drain is extensive. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, describes Iran as a transitional economy, i.e., from a planned economy to a market economy. The country has had observer status in the World Trade Organization, WTO, since 2005, but the United States and other countries oppose full membership until further notice. Knowledge and culture. Iran is one of the world's oldest cultural nations. Under the great kings, Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes and others, the Persian Empire was 559 to 330 BC. The world's leading superpower, and the capital Persepolis World Cultural Center. Several basic elements of Western culture stem from this, such as the perception of existence as a struggle between good and evil, as well as the idea of a Messiah, which only appears in the Bible after the Persians had freed them from captivity in Babylon. The Sasanian Empire 226 to 651 rivaled for 400 years with Rome and the Byzantines. After the Arab invasion in 651, the Iranians were converted to Islam, but unlike other Islamized peoples, they largely succeeded in preserving their original culture under an Islamic varnish, and numerous ancient Iranian elements live on in Iranian Shi'ism. After some dark centuries, from about 950 to 1500, Iran experienced a unique cultural, especially literary, flourishing. Poets such as Ferdowsi, Omar Khayyam, Saadi, Rumi and Hafez are among the great names of world literature, and Hafez, died 1390, is still the most widely read author in Iran. In 1501, the Twelvemists, a fanatical Shia sect, came to power and the country's population was forcibly converted to this sect. They have left behind a number of magnificent mosques, but there were tight conditions for literature and thinking. In the 20th century, society began to be modernized, but with the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the country came back under the strict regime of the 12 Imamists. The largest media channel in Iran is television, which reaches 86% of the population. Satellite equipment is in principle prohibited, but is allowed in practice. Over 50% of the population has access to the Internet, which is the largest platform for political activism. Western online communities such as Facebook, YouTube and Twitter are blocked, and opposition bloggers are imprisoned. It is mandatory for both sexes to adhere to Islamic practice. Women risk imprisonment for not covering their hair, and Western clothing is considered morally corrupt by the clergy. Polygamy is allowed, but less common in urbanized areas. Schools, beaches, libraries and hairdressing salons are separated by gender. According to the law, weddings, conferences and funerals must also be gender segregated, but this is rarely followed in practice. Iran follows Islamic time reckoning based on the lunar orbit. According to the Western, Gregorian, calendar, the calendar year begins on March 21st and lasts until March 20th of the following year. The chronology begins in the year 622, which marks the Prophet Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina.